Interblockchain. What this means. So let's begin with what interblockchains can do for us today. As a first capacity, we already have, with all the exchanges available on the market, the capacity to exchange cryptos. A good example of that would be to swap a Bitcoin for an Ether. But what is less common, though, is the capacity to move a crypto from one blockchain network to another blockchain network. For example, to move a Bitcoin on the Ethereum network, the Stellar network, or the EOS network. Before going further, let's recap some basic concepts. A cryptocurrency or a crypto asset is registered in a ledger. So when we think of a cryptocurrency or a crypto asset, let's think about a ledger. So the equation here is a cryptocurrency equals a ledger. And a blockchain is a network of servers hosting one or several ledgers. If we take, for example, Bitcoin, we have a single ledger. But if we take, on the other hand, Ethereum, we have more than one ledger. Each token hosted on that network will have its own ledger. Now, let's look at all the problems interblockchains are trying to resolve. So let's imagine a scenario. We want to move a US dollar from bank A to bank B. Bank A has its ledger implemented in an Oracle database, and we have bank B having its ledger implemented in a blockchain. So if we move a dollar from bank A to bank B, it remains the same, even if both banks don't have the very same technology. They have different technologies, but the US dollar, in that case, remained the same. So today, fiat money can be moved on different technology. The US dollar is not dependent on any particular technology. But in the case of the blockchains, it's quite different. Let's take, for example, the Bitcoin. The Bitcoin is hosted on the Bitcoin network, and we, out of the box, cannot move it to another blockchain, like, for example, EOS. So each token is basically hosted in a single blockchain and has its value in that blockchain. And it cannot be moved on other blockchains like fiat money can be moved. So today, cryptos cannot move across blockchains unless we use an external tool. And so they are restricted to a single technology, which is in contrast to fiat money, which isn't restricted to a single technology to keep its value. As a second problem, decentralized exchanges based on smart contract, for example, the 0x protocol, they do not have access to high-valued cryptos. They are restricted to the tokens hosted on the very same blockchain network where they are themselves hosted. So 0x protocol is hosted on Ethereum and can exchange actually only tokens hosted on the Ethereum network. In that case, the ERC20 based tokens. So the big problem we have now also, as a second problem, decentralized exchanges based on smart contracts. They don't have access to high-valued cryptos. As a third problem, the actual major blockchains are way too slow to compete against Visa, MasterCard, or simply debit cards for e-commerce. If we take, for example, Bitcoin, having only 7 transactions per second, and which takes up to an hour to get a final confirmation, this is way too slow. And even Ethereum with 15 transactions per second and up to 6 minutes for a final confirmation is again too slow. But we may have some light on the horizon with the third generation blockchains, which are way faster than the first and second generation blockchains. So as a potential solution, interblockchains. So now we'll go into the details of the different interblockchain mechanism, and we'll start with the exchange of cryptos. So let's imagine this scenario. We have Joe who wants to exchange 1 Bitcoin for 13 EOS tokens. So we have these two blockchains network. On the left, we have the Bitcoin network, and on the right, we have the EOS network, each represented with their own ledger, which is displayed at the bottom. So we have Joe has some tokens, some value in his account, and Joe simply transferred to Bob the 1 Bitcoin. And now in turn, Bob will transfer to Joe a 13 EOS in that case. So you can see that on the left and on the right, I mean on each blockchain network, we did a transfer, and it involves two parties. So there is an exchange ratio between these cryptos. They don't have the same value. And the economic relation in the case of an exchange is between two parties, in that case between Joe and Bob. So the second example we can take of an interblockchain mechanism is the move token. In that case, Joe wants to move 1 Bitcoin to the EOS network. Again, we have our ledgers of the Bitcoin ledger on the left and the EOS ledger on the right. So in that case, Joe, having some value in his account, will transfer to a reserve 1 Bitcoin. And then an external mechanism to this blockchain will take the very same amount, in that case 1 Bitcoin or 1 replica Bitcoin, and will move it into Joe's account. So the economic relation here is different. It's between Joe and Joe. And the moved crypto keeps its value. So the destination crypto is simply a replica of the original one. To keep the crypto's value, there is one essential condition. The crypto can be redeemed back to its original network. If the token cannot be redeemed back to its original network, either as a whole or as a fraction, think about it. Is it really the same thing? No, it's something virtual, something which is created out of the blue, because a Bitcoin or whatever the token it is has its value, real value, in the original network where it was created. So if we have a replica mechanism used to move token from one network to another one, it has to be redeemable to its original network where it will have its full value. So there's different interblockchain solutions actually offered by third parties, not by the blockchains themselves up to now. Until we have at first the relay blockchains, where a blockchain sits at the center of the solution, and we have also the strict interblockchain solutions, which could take the form of a plugin, like for example the bus plugin on the EOS network, could take the form also of an external mechanism, or can take the form of an interblockchain network like we did on Transledger. But it can take different forms. We have, for example, Polkadot. Polkadot, since several years, saying that they will move token from one blockchain to another one, but up to now what they did basically was to produce yet another blockchain. We're still waiting for a demo from them. In the case of Cosmos, it's exactly the same thing. There is a blockchain sitting in the center of the system, having all the other blockchains around it. They talk about a hub, but basically what it is a blockchain sitting at the center, having different bridges to the other blockchains. But if you want to move from one blockchain to another, you have to go through their blockchain. So it is a blockchain-centric solution in that case. Again, the very same thing with one chain. We have a blockchain sitting in the center of the system with bridges to the other blockchains. If we want to move from one blockchain to another one, we have to go through their blockchain. So it is still a blockchain-centric solution. And so it is, again, for Ion, the very same thing. They all use an intermediary blockchain, but recently we saw some new solutions appearing in the market, like BIOS. In their case, they're using a plugin which is acting at the system level in an EOS IO network, and also there's other solution using external scripts or programs to do the transfer. So this is slowly moving as the concept is gaining traction. But Transledger is doing things differently. There is no need for an intermediary blockchain. In that case, what we are doing is an interblockchain network, which is a totally different system that I will describe more in detail in another series. But what is important in that series of slides is to understand the very basic differences between exchanging a token and moving a token. So have a good day and see you for the next presentation.